Hey guys, thanks for joining us. I'm here with Danny Murr-Sloat, co-founder of AlpinStash cultivation facilities in Colorado. Danny, you've got a really interesting story. It's been a long journey to wellness for you. And I think it's something that a lot of people in the cannabis space can relate to. So I'm stoked to hear you kind of share that with us. And I think our audience will get a lot of value from hearing that journey that you've been on. It sort of began, I guess, in 2009 was the onset of your medical issues. What were you going through at that time, and how did it lead you to cannabis?
Yeah, actually, 2009 was the tail end.
Okay.
That's when I started ingesting cannabis. So shortly after I turned 21, I believe this is 2004, I woke up suddenly with pretty bad stomach pains in the middle of the night. Went to the hospital and was hospitalized for 4 or 5 days. All the pain medication and all that stuff, and did a bunch of testing. They couldn't figure out what it was, and after like the really sharp acute pain subsided, I was discharged with this sort of chronic pain and a script for Vicodin and instructions to follow up with my gastroenterologist. I did that, another series of tests, kind of everything they could throw at me. That was inconclusive, but the whole time I was, just on the script for Vicodin. Fast forward a few months, and gastroenterologists didn't really know what was going on, so they suggested I see a physiatrist, a pain doctor. And again, this was 2004. So at my first appointment with this physiatrist, he's like, well, there's some things we can do. There's some treatments and tests, but in the meantime, here's a script for something a little bit more powerful to help control your pain. And that turned out to be fentanyl. So I left that appointment, with both the lollipops, the immediate release fentanyl, and the patches. And back then, I didn't really know what that was, the opiate crisis that was sort of starting starting up, and I didn't really know, how strong that was. Of course, everybody now is familiar with that drug. So
isn't it the strongest kind of form of opioid you can get, or one of the strongest?
Yeah, it's one of the strongest. It's actually one of the opiates that they use to put you out before they intubate you for surgery. So it's definitely very potent. And it says on the box, which I didn't pay attention to because I had very much faith in the medical world and my doctors. My history was I had pretty bad asthma growing up, so I had always been around doctors and nurses and hospitals, and it had always been, sort of more of like a, emergent situation. If you can't breathe, you go to the hospital, they make you better. You go to the doctor, they give you drugs, they make you better. So I had total faith, and I never really paid attention to the inserts that say essentially, for end stage cancer pain for this fentanyl.
Wow.
So and it's the immediate release is pretty insidious. It's called Actique, and it's like a little lollipop that tastes like the little stick in Lickamade. If you've ever had those, a little white sugary stick. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's actually pretty delicious, but that's part of what makes it, I think, insidious. At least at that time. I mean, there's certainly a time and a place for pain medication, and I don't want to ever take that away from people that truly need it. But in retrospect, after all this, I was not one of those people. So anyways, I left this appointment with, fentanyl prescriptions, and started getting treatments, epidural injections, pulse radio frequency nerve ablations, just sort of, anything they could try to sort of get this pain to subside, the whole while, stronger and stronger doses of pain medication. I began to have side effects. So they gave me medication for those side effects, and then medication for the side effects of those medications, and, so on and so forth. And so then in about 2005, I developed a nerve impingement issue called thoracic outlet syndrome. It affects my whole arm, affected my whole right arm between my neck and collarbone. There's like a little outlet that your artery and your vein to your arm go, and it got compressed. My first rib kind of compressed that area. In retrospect, I attribute that actually to the pain medication, because at that point I was, on so much pain medication that I was sleeping for 16 plus hours a day, sort of in a, almost coma-like sleep, not really tossing and turning. And I believe that just sort of compressed my neck. Series of surgeries, 3 for those, and just a ton more medication, hospitalizations, dealing with the stomach thing. And then in 2009, at the beginning or late 2008, I was diagnosed with an acoustic neuroma, which is a base of skull non-cancerous tumor. So that had a pretty major surgery at the beginning of 2009 to get that out. So by then, it had been 5 years of pretty constant, just, medicated stupor. I had for the last few years been pretty reclusive, just spending time in my room or in bed or going to doctor's appointments, and that was it, no social life, no interactions, and was pretty hopeless. And then in the fall of 2009, my dad actually came to me and he said, medical cannabis is a thing now, and maybe you should go and try that. So I went and got my medical card, and in September, and tried it for the first time right around 2000, December 2009, beginning of December 2009. I had ingested cannabis in high school, had a good time, and then sort of after that, I had only had a few experiences, and they had been, especially leading up to this, had been kind of negative experiences. So I was hesitant to try cannabis, which is why I got my card in September. Didn't try it till beginning of December.
Mm.
I kind of had felt like I had nothing to lose, and any negative experiences I might have would have been maybe would be outweighed by the positive experiences. And I had my best friend Evan, who eventually helped co-found AlpinStash, but he was there, and he definitely smoked, and he was like, "You should try this. Make sure you have a good time, and you should definitely give this a shot." So I went to a dispensary. I got free clones with purchase, and came home with a few different cultivars to try, and I smoked, and to my surprise, it helped with the pain a bunch, but it also kind of helped, give me some mental space to exist in, which that I wasn't in pain, and I also wasn't, focused on and thinking about pain.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
so
that
as
can
I
really be dominating. It'll cloud your whole mind if you're feeling pain. That's all you can think about.
Yeah, and it, not only does it cloud I mean, I would say it clouds your whole being, especially having been in it for that long, and, pretty much my daily focus during the hours which I was awake, because, they're pretty limited because of all the opiates, were, it was dominated by this, whether that was my only social interactions being doctors or
Mhm.
injections or things like that, to just, being depressed because of being in this essentially stupor. And it's very tricky, because as you begin on these medications, you certainly feel euphoric, but as you kind of go into chronic use of them, you really don't notice the aspects of your life slipping away, things like judgment, and just what makes you you and what makes you human. They just sort of slip away. It's sort of like a lobster in a boiling pot. You don't notice everything turning up,
Mm.
but you're in it, and then you come out of it. If you're lucky enough to do that, you come out of it, and then you reflect, and you're like, wow, that was just so intense and so crazy. But at the time, it began to feel normal, and it was very uh, very weird thing, to be honest. So I got these, anyways, I got these clones. Cannabis was providing me with this physical relief from pain and this
Yeah.
emotional break, and I began to grow these clones, for fun and for a form of therapy. I had always found gardening very, therapeutic, and so I decided to give these, try growing these clones, and that began to give me, a reason to get out of bed, a reason to kind of care for something, to engage. And I made every mistake, grown mistake in the book, and that ends up being a lot of physical work. So that was a form for me to get, back active again, and really, began to plug back into life. And as that happened, and as I realized, I could exist in this pain-free state, or, even reduced pain at that point was awesome. That I could, get myself off all these medications that I had been prescribed for so long, and began to take myself off of, wean myself off these medications, and, lose weight because I was being so active with growing.
Wow. And maybe I missed it, I hope not, but at some point, were they able to figure out what the original start of the pain was, the severe stomach pain?
Yeah, so it's so crazy. I eventually was diagnosed with pelvic floor dysfunction, which is just essentially, you have all these complicated muscles in your pelvic floor, and one or a couple of them began spasming, and that was the cause of the pain. And I had the doctors told me that I had a hyperactive immune system, which was essentially, attacking this area, making it spasm. And so they actually put me on Tagamet, because Tagamet has something in it that kind of calms your immune system. So after all these years and all these medications and all these opiates, I took Tagamet for 8 weeks until everything calmed down.
Wow.
Um, yeah, but by that time, so the stomach pain went away, but I was still dealing with my thoracic outlet syndrome, and then eventually recovering from this base of skull surgery. And then I learned, I came to find out, as I got off these medications, my arm began to feel better too. And part of that was, re-engaging in life, but also, opiates, if you take them for chronic pain, depending on the type of pain, they can actually make it worse. Your body will end up devoting more nerve pathways to pain sensation. And so you actually become in more pain, and you take more opiates, and then more pain and more opiates. And then the whole while, if you're, really stationary and, just not moving around, your body starts to deteriorate. So,
Wow.
the cure, aside from the surgeries, and I still had pain even after these surgeries, the thing that eventually made it get much better was getting off pain medications and being active. And for me, cannabis, both ingestion and growing, was the key to that.
Yeah. So it started out, as an attempt for pain relief, and then your relationship really evolved because of the cultivation aspect. Can you tell me a
Yes,
bit more about how that change started to happen and how you really became, now you're a master cultivator?
yeah, absolutely. So, I think it's important to note that I, took a very active role in my recovery. I had spent all this time really wanting to be better, wanting to be active again. I had gained 70 pounds, and, had always enjoyed, before that, I'm a Colorado native. I had always enjoyed sort of the outdoor lifestyle. And so that had always been a goal of mine. And I had become acutely aware of, wanting to do things again, and wanting to do stuff that brought me joy and that brought me satisfaction. And for me, a lot of that had to do with, being physical, and being outdoors. So, as I got a physical break from this pain and this depression, from cannabis, I began to, like, really actively pursue, things that brought me joy, and things that made me active, and, and things that allowed me to, shift my focus from being in, like, a depressed pain medical, almost like victim mentality, to actually trying to become, kind of get my life back under control and plug back into life. And for me, caring for these plants was so important. And I recognized early on that, this works for me. And maybe if I sort of devote myself to this, that I can pursue a career or even a profession, eventually, in cannabis. And that became a goal of mine. And so, and that gave me something to strive for every day. That gave me something to, begin to think long term. If I can get better today, I can, at growing, I can grow better tomorrow. And if I can do that, who knows where I'll be in a month, and who knows where I'll be in a year, and maybe even one day I can do this professionally. At that point, pretty much all my 20s have been, just in, this medical funk. From the ages of 21 through 29, I had I had no real, like, goals. I didn't have a, path. I didn't have any, career opportunities or skills. And, I've been so shut away that the idea of trying to, jump back into things and learn a whole new, go to school or something like that was really daunting. So, growing became the thing that I could attach myself to and, see a future in. And, that idea of hope and that goal was, so important for me, for my recovery, because getting out of the physical pain, in a sense, with thanks to cannabis was almost the easy part because I'd ingest it and I feel better. And then as I began to feel better, I'd get up and move, go outside even, go on walks in nature, watch anime, the things that I, enjoyed that I could use as an escape, from being depressed. I definitely did, but the plugging back into life, the plugging back into society, being social again, that was the really hard part that took years to kind of be comfortable with. And, growing was that thing that I could, relate with people that I began to surround myself with and I could, use to, give myself, hope and sort of a sense of self-worth.
Yeah, you've mentioned that you felt that maybe you're a little bit introverted. And so I wonder if going to dispensaries, was that approachable for you, or was that something that was a little bit intimidating since you weren't that into cannabis anyway?
Yeah, I think, uh, I went to a lot of dispensaries. I actually started going to pretty much as many as I could and trying as much as I could. And I experienced both very welcoming dispensaries and very off-putting ones. Like you said, I wasn't really part of the culture. It was at first very intimidating to walk in and see, such a selection and kind of have no idea. And I was acutely aware of those dispensaries that had an atmosphere of welcoming, an atmosphere of like, encouraging questions. Nothing was dumb, bud tenders that really wanted to take the time to help me, didn't mind my, probably annoying questions or, little details that I was asking. And I was aware of the ones that were the opposite, that just seemed too cool, or too snobby or too just, off-putting. And that was, really it was thanks to some of the more approachable ones that I really continued down this path. And it was, I guess, despite some of the ones that weren't so friendly or welcoming, or didn't seem like they would cater to me because I wasn't cool enough. It was despite them that I continued along this, and actually experienced that completely in the world of growing too. And I was lucky enough to, after a few years down that, I started. I worked at a grow store, and I worked at the one that was, everybody there was nerdy like me, the boss and the employee, all three of us were nerds, and, really worked to make that a welcoming, atmosphere as well, because that's another side of this industry that, tends to be very egotistical and very, unapproachable to some people. And it's just, such a shame because I feel like there's a lot of missed opportunities to, really empower patients, and help the accessibility of this plant by, presenting, an off-putting atmosphere. And in
Mhm.
fact, I have an example. My father-in-law during quarantine, and this was, in April, went to the dispensary down the road. Everybody was lined up, and a bud tender walked out and said, "Does anybody else have any stupid questions for us?" And that was
Mm.
just like, yes, I mean, it still happens. And,
Wow.
he's a pretty gruff guy, so he fired something back that was sassy and, got his edible or whatever and left. But, that,
Mhm.
I mean, that stuff still happens and it's really a shame.
Wow. Yeah. Well, with that in mind, what advice would you give to people who are thinking about trying it maybe for the first time?
Yeah, that's a great question. When it comes to like which cultivar or strain you're going to try, my best advice was actually the advice that I got that first day that I walked into a dispensary, which was, follow your nose, or your nose knows. So, this is a little tricky. That particular piece of advice is a little tricky now with COVID because you don't always have the opportunity to, smell or look at the buds. But if you get that opportunity, that's where I would suggest you try, because if you your first experiences of how a particular flower is going to treat you is generally going to be your first impressions, which if it smells good, that's awesome. If it smells bad, then, you're already kind of setting yourself up for, a negative experience, or not, maybe not negative, but just not like an optimal one. So kind of in lieu of, being actually physically smell it, if you can, pick the bud tender's brain to try to get the idea of, what the flavors and smells are going to be, I think that's, a great place to start. Go with something that, if you're a big fan of, grape flavors, for example, we have a cultivar that I bred called Lemmy Winks that's just super grapey. And for people that like that, like myself, that's my favorite, like candy flavor or snow cone flavor. So if I'm already set up with something that I find, enticing and delicious, chances are I'm going to have a pretty good time. So that's my first piece of advice when you're selecting something to try. But when you're actually using it, and especially for medical reasons, take an active role in your recovery. And so for me, that was so important, and that looked like ingesting and then finding relief, and then taking that opportunity to do something that I found that brought me joy and that brought me satisfaction. And again, I mentioned it could be as simple, and for me, it was initially as going outside and sitting, in my backyard, just and enjoying outside, or watching anime, just something that I could kind of lose myself in, and really begin to open up that emotional and that mental space in my being, that was like, I can exist in a space that's not in pain, and that's not in this depressed space. And so use that relief that you find uh, to do something and to make your situation better. And then my last advice really is like, find something that you can look forward to, and that gives you hope, and that you can progress at. Because for me, that was the combination of those three things, the pain relief and the emotional and mental relief cannabis gave me, the active decision to use that space and that time to kind of make my existence feel better, and to do things that brought me joy. And then the attempt to better my life long term by doing something that I did that was a goal of mine, and by pursuing something that gave me hope and a sense of the future will be good. And that's so important. So often in cannabis, and in healing in general, people talk about just finding relief by ingesting cannabis, and that's so overwhelmingly important. But I think that you have to take an active role in your recovery and really use that space to better yourself, and to better your life. And I think that for me, cannabis gave me that, and for me, growing cannabis gave me that as well.
I think that's super powerful. I don't think often enough when discussing cannabis that we talk about how it's really a mental relief as well. And I think that's something that you've woven into your story, is that it made room for you to start thinking about other aspects of your life again, and how you wanted to
Yeah.
reinvigorate those parts of your being. I think that's powerful stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I just feel like in recovery in general, it's always this focus on, or for the most part, it's a focus on like physical recovery. And while that, is often, necessary, a necessary step, like a key step, that's for me not the only step. And, that mental and emotional and spiritual recovery was, you know, as important. Couldn't have happened without the physical recovery, but was the thing that's kind of cemented all of that. And to be honest, was the thing that took work.
Yeah. Well, so now you're running a craft cultivation facility. Has your physical well-being kept up with the demands of sort of that intensity? I think there's what, three of you on staff, or three founders. I mean, it's a small team, and you're putting out a lot of product.
Yeah, my business partner, he's kind of stepped away, so it's and my wife has taken over. So it's myself and my wife. She's been with us since 2016. We were licensed in 2014. We had plants in 2015. And then at that time, later in that year, beginning of or middle of 2016, my business partner stepped away, and my wife, who was then my girlfriend and or fiance, kind of happened around the same time. She stepped in and helped, run it with me. And yeah, we have 2 full-time employees now and 1 part-time. So there's, 5 of us. And yeah, absolutely, my physical uh, abilities have definitely kept up with the demands of that job. And there have been dips, but my emotional and mental abilities have kept up as well. Those definitely continue to take work to keep going. But the doing actually working every day to achieve the goals and the things that I spent so much time consciously thinking of and consciously working towards, like that coming to fruition or steps along that way is just, it means everything to do something that I love at the end of the day, that brings me joy, but also something that kind of creates a future for myself and my family. Doing that alone is is amazing and is kind of everything, but doing that with my wife is the best part of that. And we work hard every day to produce the best quality product that we can, the best quality flower, to make unique and novel genetics. First and foremost, because it's what we want to do. It's what brings us happiness. It's what brings us a sense of you know joy and doing something that we love. And then with the idea that this is our business, and this is something that we're using to build our life, is essentially the icing on the cake.
It sounds like you've imbued the ideals that you kind of gathered while you were going through that experience into your current company. And that was sort of the reason you started your own company, right? Was because you felt like you wanted to create something that was reflective of your own sort of moral compass when it came to how things were produced. Is that accurate?
Yes, absolutely. I actually got my first industry job at a dispensary in 2010, and at that job, because of my healing, that the journey that I was on, that cannabis was so much a part of. I really spent my time with patients, and was actually switched over to what became the grow, because I was told that I was taking too much time with the patients, talking to them. So that's any prospective dispensary owners or bud tenders, like, don't do that. Let your employees that are passionate talk about it, and help empower patients. But I was switched to the grow. This business was a close family friend owned this business, and I pretty quickly saw that the ethics of this company and the grow style didn't align at all to what I held dear, in terms of being environmentally conscious, and using organic or natural and sustainable nutrients, and even pesticide application, and just work environment. So I ended up quitting that job after a few months. At that time, I took horticulture classes and worked at this grow store, and then I quit that job a few years later to work in a grow for another family friend. This family friend had been a family friend for like 45 years, of a friend of my dad's. And so I thought, for sure I would be treated at least good here. I'm not looking for anything special, but I thought that, any special treatment, but I thought it would at least be decent. And when that job, after a couple of weeks, was, even worse, I was treated even worse in the first one. There was even more unsavory grow practices there.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, it became clear to me that if I wanted to, grow in a way that I found aligned with my goals, and in a way that at the end of the day I felt good about myself and what I had done, and used my, the knowledge that I was building for good, for lack of a better term, that I would have to start my own business. And in fact, years later now, it's unfortunate, but most of the growers that I know that have the same passion that I do, kind of took their turn in the cannabis industry, and, had a ton of negative experiences, and almost none of them work in the industry anymore. And I feel, very fortunate that I was able to, that I and with the help of my wife, were able to create a place that in which we could, work and do the thing we love in a way that brings us satisfaction and a good feeling.
Wow. That's a hell of a journey, Danny. Like from from not feeling well and not really being maybe even interested in trying the plant again, and then to your current endeavors where you're putting out some really high quality stuff that I think is super valuable for people who are using it medicinally, especially to know that that kind of care and attention has been paid to how it was grown is pretty awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, my life took a complete 180. So many of my beliefs and so many of my experiences, they just you know changed completely. My thought, and I'm not gonna you know lie about this at all, but my thoughts about cannabis when it was medicinal before I started it was like, oh, it's just stoners trying to get their foot in the door for this.
Mm.
And so it was very it was shook me, essentially it shook a lot of my beliefs to the core, and took some time to embrace this and see how wrong I was, with that mindset going in. And a lot of that was, just the era I grew up in. You know, we that went through the DARE program, have a lot
Mhm.
of programming that's deep, and it's strange because I was born and raised in Boulder, Colorado, which is generally a pretty cannabis friendly place. My parents were definitely cannabis supporters, and yeah, I had received no pushback or qualms from anybody except from myself.
Mm.
That was the first mind that I had to change in that. And the other belief that completely was fundamental to me was how much I should trust doctors and Western medicine, and how all doctors are in this for the good of the patient. And that was definitely, my thoughts on that have changed quite a bit too.
Mm. Well, lastly, Danny, is there anything you'd like our audience to take away from our discussion that maybe we haven't hit on, or anything you just want to reiterate?
Yeah, I think that you have to take an active role in your recovery as a patient. And I feel like as somebody that is helping another person along the way with their, healing journey, or just, introducing them to cannabis, I think that you have to be very cognizant of that, and you should try to support that in all ways that you can, and really encourage that. And, for people that are watching this, I would encourage everybody to try growing for themselves. I feel like for me that was so therapeutic, and it's such a big part of our company to encourage people, home growers, people to try this themselves. There's a belief that that's a threat to the people in this industry, that home growers are a threat to grows and dispensaries, and we have the complete opposite view, that it's super therapeutic, it's super healing, and it helps people appreciate the work and the love that we put in our plants. And I think that it's super important, if you have the ability, to try that, especially during this time where you might be stuck at home, you might not have something that you can do, a passion that you can pursue actively. You might not have the best access to cannabis. If you are able to do it, certainly I can't recommend trying that enough. And to that end, we have a lot. AlpinStash has a lot of sort of our energy is focused to empowering people to try growing. Whether that's through our YouTube, our Instagram, and we're kind of, so one of the things we're gearing up to do is to support that side a lot. And I think that it's a very healing experience.
That's awesome. I think a lot of people in our audience could relate to your journey. And it rings a lot of bells for me too, going through experiences with people who are terminally ill. So I really appreciate you bringing those perspectives to emerge today, and I think our audience was lucky to hear them. If anyone who's out there listening has their own experiences that they want to share with cannabis and tech today, feel free to submit your stories at cannatechtoday.com/submit. And for Danny Murr-Sloat and myself, thanks everybody for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the Emerge conference.
Today's episode of Cannabis Tech Talks is brought to you by Epac Flexible Packaging. Epac is a digitally based, flexible packaging company serving cannabis brands of all sizes with custom stand-up pouches, lay-flat pouches, and roll stock. Leveraging the latest in digital print technology, Epac's quick turnaround time, low minimum orders, and ability to easily make design changes provides brands with a simple way to order certified child-resistant packaging. Epac enables brands to develop smart packaging solutions to verify authenticity, track and trace products' journey, and engage with customers like never before. To learn more about Epac Flexible Packaging, go to epacflexibles.com.